Alright guys, in today's video we're talking about the PS5, and I want to highlight some things that were recently said about the PlayStation 5 when it comes to development, how easy this console is to develop for. This comes from Digital Foundry's Richard Leadbetter, and I'm sure many of you are aware, or at least some of you, that I did say on my last podcast I was going to make a dedicated video on this topic because I think it's actually really significant, something that is certainly worth taking some time to point out and make people aware of, because Richard Leadbetter is a very credible individual. He's somebody that when he talks about this type of stuff, you're going to want to listen because he has connections and he would not be saying these things if they weren't true. We also know that there have been rumors that have kind of popped up all throughout 2020 and even back in 2019 a little bit, where apparently the PS5 is difficult to develop for. Developers are having issues, specifically looking at Resident Evil Village and whatnot. And a lot of times these sources, I would say, are questionable at best. But we have somebody such as Richard Leadbetter, who I would say is not questionable. I'd say they're a very good source. Somebody, again, you do want to listen to when they're talking about this stuff. Letting us know what he's heard from developers when it comes to development for not just the PS5, but the Xbox Series X as well. And I find it incredibly interesting. So this is what we're going to be going over. If you could do me a favor, if you do end up enjoying the video and you do enjoy the content, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell notification icon as well. But I'm actually going to start by reading this article over on Push Square because they are one of the few websites that I saw actually covering this. But at some point, I am actually going to play the clip for you guys as well, so you can hear exactly what Richard Leadbetter had to say. But reading from Push Square, it says, ever since the exotic architecture of the PlayStation 3, there's always this lingering concern that Sony could make a console that's impossible to work with. Back when it announced the PlayStation 4, system architect Mark Cerny tackled this point directly. And while most studios have suggested that they are thrilled with the PlayStation 5, there have been some rumors suggesting that Sony's next-gen hardware is a headache to work with, particularly with regards to Resident Evil Village. Speaking as part of a digital EGX panel, however, Digital Foundry's Richard Leadbetter shared some good news for early PS5 adopters. Every single developer I've spoken to developing for PS5 has been evangelizing how easy it is to work for, he said. It's essentially the same development environment as PS4, and you scale up from there. For the new powers, the features, and whatnot, I can't stress enough how happy developers seem to be with this situation. Now, something this article does not mention is that in that same discussion that Richard Leadbetter was having, he then went on to talk a little bit about development on the Xbox Series X. And the irony here, and I want people to understand that this isn't my attempt to kind of slander the Series X in any way, but this is, again, something that you do want to pay attention to. And frankly, I have not seen anybody, literally anybody, pointing this out. And I think it maybe is something that is, we should be paying attention to, and it could very well explain why we have yet to see a single game, as far as I know anyway, as far as I'm aware, we have yet to see a single game actually running on the Xbox Series X. Now, that may change in the next couple of days or hopefully very soon. I have to imagine they're going to show something before the console actually launches. But Richard Leadbetter went on to discuss how if developers are having any issues based off of what he's heard, it's actually with the Series X. They're not like extreme. They're not issues that is like, oh man, that's just terrible. No, it's just more, it sounds like things are a little bit more complicated because of the development tools. It sounds like Microsoft really revamped and changed up their dev tools a lot, and it's just taking developers a little bit longer to really kind of figure them out and wrap their heads around it. And this is actually due to the fact that when a developer or when a studio is, working within the Xbox ecosystem, they're working with a bunch of different SKUs. You have the Series S, you have the Series X. If you're going to be doing cross-gen, you have the One X, you have PC, you have to think of xCloud potentially. I mean, I know that's just streaming, but there's just all these different factors, all these different platforms and SKUs that developers have to work with. And so because of that, Richard Leadbetter really did make it sound like some developers are perfectly fine with it, but others are finding that it's a little bit more difficult. So I'm actually going to play the clip for you here so you can hear it from Richard Leadbetter himself. So here, give it a listen.
Well, okay, there are two ways to look at this. First of all, I can tell you every single developer I've spoken to developing for PlayStation 5 has been evangelizing how easy it is to work for. It's essentially the same development as environment as PlayStation 4, and you scale up from there for the new power, the new features, and whatnot. I can't stress enough how happy developers seem to be with this situation. Um, Now, specs wise, Xbox Series X, there's been a lot of conjecture about how, Sony's boost clock brings it into contention against Series X. How but bafflingly to me, how a solid state storage drive with higher bandwidth is going to make for better graphics. If you look at the numbers, there is simply no doubt that the Xbox Series X is, on paper, the more powerful machine. However, again, speaking to developers, the development environment that they're dealing with, some people seem to be extremely happy with it. Other people are having problems with it because they've moved away from what was previously the XDK, which was specific for Xbox, to the GDK, which is a more general development environment for PC and for Xbox. And even Xbox One is encompassed by the GDK. So, the long-term win with the GDK is that you're going to be able to develop for it and deploy across all of these different systems. But in the short term, I have heard developers having some problems with it. And whether that is all going to sort of manifest in final games is the big question. So, yeah, it's really difficult to call at this moment. And I think ultimately the specs issue is an interesting one, but it's all going to be down to the final software. It always is.
So to me, it's kind of obvious that Richard Leadbetter had a lot of very interesting things to say, and everything he says makes a lot of sense to me based off of everything we have heard, everything we know, and everything we have seen. He does make it clear that yes, on paper, the Series X is the more powerful console. No one can deny that. But at the end of the day, it's not so much just about the specs, it's about how easy the console is to develop for, how developer friendly is it, and you can clearly hear him explain that every developer he's spoken with is just letting him know how great the PS5 is to develop for, how easy it is, and Sony really did make it that simple, to whereas things are a little bit more complicated on the Xbox side of things because they switched from the XDK to the GDK, I guess, development environment, and there's more to it, and some developers are fine with it and they're having no issues. But again, other developers are finding it a little bit more complicated and it's going to take them more time. And it's interesting because if you remember when we saw Halo Infinite, it was revealed. Now, obviously, it's clear that 343 Industries, they have a lot of issues that they have to work out. And I think a lot of what we saw with Halo Infinite, it doesn't come down to, oh man, the Series X is just not a good console and it can't run games properly or anything like that. I think it just comes down to the competence level of 343 Industries and just a lot of the issues they run into. But one of the things that was mentioned and was really off-putting is that ray tracing was going to have to be implemented into Halo Infinite later on through a patch. We're hearing that again with Devil May Cry 5, the Ultimate Edition or the new edition that's coming out for the next generation consoles. They confirmed that ray tracing will be there day one on the PS5, but it's going to have to come in an update a little bit later on for the Xbox Series X version. And to me, that's just very telling. To me, that kind of really backs up what we're hearing Richard Leadbetter say here. Now, that doesn't mean that no games at all at launch or around launch of the Series X will have ray tracing. Of course, there are going to be titles that do have ray tracing, but I think what it comes down to is exactly what Richard said at the end here, where it's about the software. And this is where I think Sony is really just doing such a better job than Microsoft. Honestly, I understand that Microsoft has really not built, but kind of gained a lot of momentum very recently with the announcement of the Bethesda acquisition. There's no doubt that really was a big move for them, a huge boost. But at the end of the day, I think Microsoft still has a lot to prove in the games area. I think that a lot of the stuff that they do have is it's going to take time to really show up, to whereas what we see from Sony right now is they're kind of in full force. They're not just showing a little bit of gameplay on the PS5 right now. They're showing a lot, and a lot of what they're showing is very impressive. It looks really good. We're seeing ray tracing. We're seeing games like Ratchet and Clank attempt to do things anyway that just aren't possible on the last gen hardware. We're seeing this stuff in front of us, and it all looks really good. It looks really impressive. And unfortunately, we're just not really seeing that same output software-wise for Microsoft. Hopefully we will, and I think we will eventually, but it's just, look, I'm not trying to sit here and say that there's no chance whatsoever that any developers are having any issues with PS5 development. There's just no way. No, of course, developers are going to have issues here and there with all different development environments. And when it comes to a game like Resident Evil Village, I can't sit here and tell you definitively that they aren't having issues. I don't know. I don't have contacts. I don't speak to Capcom. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe they are really having development issues. But if one single studio is having development issues, does that mean all developers are having issues? Does that mean Sony really messed up? Does that mean this is another PS3 situation? No, because there's most likely developers also having issues with the Series X as well. But I guess all I'm trying to get at here, guys, is this to me is something that is worth paying attention to, and it is worth listening to, because this is not just some random person on the internet who says that they have sources, who says that they have contacts. This is Richard Leadbetter of Digital Foundry. He's highly respected, he's held in high regard, and he does not even remotely come off as the type of individual who would just say these things for the sake of saying them for attention or anything else. He's saying these things because this is actually what he's hearing, and that's why I'm taking time to point it out. This isn't a video to attempt to slander the Xbox Series X. I know some people are going to take it that way. It's really not. I just really think what this video is meant to do is let everybody know that, look, the PS5 seems to be a really great console for developers. Developers seem to love it. This is what we've been hearing consistently, but most importantly, we're seeing the results. We're seeing the results in front of us. So if you don't want to take anybody's word for it, just look at what you've been shown, and that should answer your questions immediately. That should dispel any fear and any doubt. To whereas, we can't help but kind of look at the other side of the coin here, listen to what else Richard Leadbetter's saying, and kind of put two and two together here. And we haven't seen games running on the Series X. We haven't seen any game running with ray tracing on the Series X. We're hearing some games are going to have ray tracing patched in later on. And now we're hearing from Richard Leadbetter that apparently because of the switch in the development environment, it's going to take developers a little bit longer to really fully wrap their heads around it. So really interesting stuff, guys. I hope you did enjoy this video. Again, it's a discussion video, and this was something I certainly wanted to take some time to discuss with you. So leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Leave the video a like if you enjoyed it or found it informative. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and haven't already. Hit the bell notification icon so you never miss an upload, and feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.